Just said it's being sent to a third party, so that's good.
Should be working now. I think it's going.
It says it's being streamed on YouTube, so it's working.
Great. For anyone who's interested, there's about a 15-second delay. Welcome, everyone. We'll just give it another minute or two and then get started.
Good morning. My name is Brent Landells, and I'm the 2024 President-elect of Oregon Realtors. Thank you all for joining us this morning. We would like to extend special thanks to the members of the press, communication directors, and press secretaries who have joined us on Zoom, and to the elected officials and members of the public who are viewing the live stream on our YouTube channel. We greatly appreciate your attention to Oregonians' housing preferences, especially at a time when urgently addressing our housing supply and affordability crisis is a top concern of the public, advocates, and elected officials alike. Today, you will hear from Joe Good about the results of a statewide poll conducted by American Strategies last month to better understand the housing preferences of Oregonians. After Joe concludes his presentation, we will take questions from the press. After we get through the questions for Joe, I'd like to invite our Realtors members of the legislature, Representatives Breeze Iverson and Senator Meek, along with our coalition partners from the Oregon Home Builders Association and the Oregon Property Owners Association to take questions on how this poll relates to the housing policies in the upcoming legislative session. We are hopeful our legislators will consider this information on the types of homes and communities the citizens of Oregon truly want to live in and raise their families in. Joe Good is the Chief Executive Officer of American Strategies. Good conducts public opinion surveys and provides strategic advice for trade associations, nonprofits, and corporations. He has worked for and advised organizations and political campaigns for more than 30 years as a pollster, consultant, and executive. He has worked closely with the National Association of Realtors since 2007, providing opinion research on real estate and development issues in all 50 states and hundreds of localities. Before coming to American Strategies, Good was the Chief Operating Officer at the polling firm Greenberg, Quinlan, and Rosner. Earlier, he was the Senior Analyst on company CEO Stan Greenberg's work for the Clinton for President campaign in 1992 and the firm's subsequent work for the Clinton administration. Joe, thank you for discussing the results of your poll this morning. The floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Brent. And good morning, everyone. Looking forward to sharing the results of the recent survey that we conducted for the Oregon Realtors on housing supply and housing preference issues. So I'm going to take about 15 to 20 minutes to kind of walk you through the highlights of the poll. There is going to be a full questionnaire with question wording and some summary documents available to you at the end. They'll give you the link for that if you want to download the entire questionnaire. I'm just going to try and hit on some of the high points and share some of the major findings from the research. If you could hold your questions till the end, we should be able to get through this. I'll be able to get through this in about 15 or 20 minutes. Okay, well, anyway, let's see here. Here we go. We want to start with just kind of housekeeping in terms of how the survey was conducted. The poll was conducted from January 16th to the 21st using a hybrid methodology where we both interview folks live on cell phone or some of the few remaining landlines that are out there, as well as texting links to voters as well, and they can take the poll online. So we draw the sample from a third-party vendor file of registered voters. That's going to be a random sample. And then we're going to set some quotas to make sure that we are representative of all voters in Oregon. So once that's done, we had 694 total interviews. That gives us a margin of error of plus or minus 3.7 percentage points. So the poll has three sections. We're going to start with some mood questions. Then we're going to do a little deeper dive into housing issues. And then finally, we're going to go over housing preference and community preferences for Oregonians. The poll started with kind of a traditional right direction, wrong track question. You always see the question wording down here at the bottom of my slides. We asked respondents, generally speaking, do you think that things in Oregon are going in the right direction? Or do you feel that things have gotten off on the wrong track? And you can see over here on the left that Oregonians are in a pretty sour mood. 61% feel that the state is off on the wrong track. Only 34% feel that things are going in the right direction. Folks who live in urban areas, this is based on census tracts, so more dense areas, urban areas of Oregon, they're a little more upbeat at 40% right direction. But even those folks are 54% wrong track. In our suburban areas, 34% right direction, 60% wrong track. In our rural areas, only 30% right direction, fully 67% say things are off on the wrong track. And the next question we wanted to ask folks was, as we're going into this legislative session, what are the most important issues for the governor and the state legislature to focus on? And we gave our respondents 6 topics, and we also gave them the chance to type in their own concern if they wanted to do that. We asked them to say, which of the following is most important for you in terms of the governor and the state legislature to focus on? Housing affordability and availability, homelessness, crime, the economy and jobs, climate change and the environment, or roads and transportation, or they could fill in something else if they would rather fill in another issue. So what we found was that voters were very focused on housing issues. 29% said that housing affordability and availability is the one concern that they believe is the single most important issue for the governor and the state legislature to focus on. 25% said homelessness. So that's fully 54% of our registered voters are focused on housing and affordability issues or homelessness. It's clearly a top of mind issue for all of Oregon, and it's very much so the top issue agenda that they want the legislature and the governor to focus on. Second tier issues are crime. 15% mentioned crime. 13% talked about the economy and jobs. And then we got in single digits in terms of climate change and the environment, and only 1% roads and transportation. We had about 10% who said something else, things like education, some folks complaining about the leftward lean of the state. But your takeaway from here is that by far, housing and homelessness are the top issues for voters as the legislature starts their session. Now, from there, we wanted to quantify some of the issues surrounding housing affordability and housing supply. And we started with a question that I ask a lot around the country, and that's we ask our respondents to think about the issue of housing. How much of a problem is housing affordability in Oregon? That is to say, how much it costs to buy or rent a home. Is housing affordability a very big problem, a fairly big problem, a moderate problem, a slight problem, or not a problem at all? And you can see over here, 57% say that housing affordability in Oregon at large is a very big problem. That's a really high number. We do this poll a lot of different places. I was in North Carolina probably about a month ago. Only 44% in a place like North Carolina said housing affordability was a very big problem. Out on the West Coast, we do see this in California and Washington, around the 54 to 57 to even 60%. Very big problem, but you can see how top of mind of issue this is. Another 27% calling it a fairly big problem. So over 80% saying that housing affordability is either a very big or fairly big problem. Another 12% calling it a moderate problem. Now, when you have that many folks saying that something is that big of a problem, you can get a sense of what the scope is. Yes, renters are more likely to say that affordability is a very big problem. At 71% of our renters say housing affordability is a very big problem. Another 21% say it's a fairly big problem. That's 92% overall, a very big or fairly big problem. But even our homeowners, our people who are already in a home, that already own a home, 47% call affordability a very big problem, 32% a fairly big problem. And this isn't limited to just young people or people who are trying to get into a home. If you break this out by age, you can see over here, these are our age brackets, 18 to 34, ages 35 to 49, ages 50 to 64, and our senior citizens. Majorities of all age groups see the affordability issue in Oregon as a very big problem or a fairly big problem. And when you look over here at the combined of those two calling it a big problem, you can see it's anywhere from 8 and 10 to almost 9 and 10 voters in Oregon acknowledging and seeing that this affordability issue is really causing all sorts of problems across the state. Now, from there, we wanted to go a little more micro and ask people, how much of a financial strain is paying your rent or your mortgage each month, so that we can get a little more sense of how this affordability problem is affecting our individual voters in Oregon. And we ask whether is what you're paying in rent or mortgage a significant strain, a slight strain, not much of a strain, or no strain at all. And what we see is that 1 in 4 voters, 26%, say that what they're paying in rent or mortgage each month is a significant strain on their monthly budget. Another 30% say just their housing costs. We're not talking about groceries and cost of living and everything else. Just what they're paying for rent and mortgage, 30% call it a slight strain. So half of Oregon voters, 56%, say that what they're paying in rent or mortgage each month is either a significant strain or a slight strain on their budget. Now, this is a question that does correlate heavily with age. You can see here our 18 to 34-year-olds, 40% say what they're paying in rent or mortgage is a significant strain. Another 34% say it's a slight strain. Among our voters aged 35 to 49, 27% say it's a significant strain, and another 36% a slight strain. But even our older voters over the age of 50, 21%, 1 in 5 of our 50 to 64-year-olds say their mortgage or rent costs is causing a significant strain in their budget. It's only senior citizens where that strain number gets below 50%, but even 1/3 of seniors, many of whom have paid off their house, 34% say that what they're paying in rent or mortgage is a significant or a slight strain. This question is also going to heavily correlate with home ownership and income. So look at our renters. 46% of our renters say what they're paying in rent is a significant strain. Another 29% say it's a slight strain. Folks who are making $75,000 a year or less, their household income, 40% a significant strain, 30% a slight strain. But even among folks making over $75,000 a year, 43% are feeling either a very significant strain or a slight strain in their housing costs. So that's going to give you some sense of how people are experiencing the cost of affordability, how big of a problem it is across the state, how it's affecting them personally. Next, we wanted to get a sense of how voters are perceiving what's out there in the market, the types of housing that's available for certain kinds of groups, and then just renters and places to rent and homes to buy. So we asked, please tell me if you think there is too much, too little, or the right amount of each of the following in your part of Oregon, the part of Oregon where you live. Housing for people with low incomes, housing for people with moderate incomes, housing for older people looking to downsize, single-family homes available to purchase, and places to rent. So what I'm going to show you here are the percentages that said there's too little of that kind of housing available. And starting with places to rent, 61% say that there are too few places to rent in their part of Oregon. 61%, 6 out of 10. When we talk about single-family homes available to purchase, 65% say there's too little of that kind of housing stock available. We didn't even say affordable housing to purchase or housing in your budget. Just the idea of whether there's enough single-family homes available to purchase in your neck of the woods, 65% say there's too little of that kind of housing available. And then when we asked about specific constituencies, housing for older people who are looking to downsize or have special need, 71% say there's too little of that kind of housing available. Housing for people with moderate incomes, 76% say there's too little of that kind of housing available. And when we talk about people for housing with low incomes, 81% say there's too little of that kind of housing available in their part of Oregon. So these numbers are all off the chart. You can see that people both see a shortage in the kinds of housing that are available to buy or rent, and how that really hurts specific constituencies like moderate income folks, low income folks, seniors. There's just not enough housing out there for those types of folks right now in their part of Oregon. Now, one more thing we wanted to get a sense of before we move on to some of the other preference type questions was what does our sample look like in terms of home ownership? And are these folks thinking about buying a home? So we did ask, do you currently own your home, rent your home, or are you living with friends and family? We have about 60% homeowners. That's about average for the national average. 28% are renters. 10% say they're still living at home or they're living with friends or family. We then asked those renters and those people who are living with friends or family, compared to other things you want to do in your life, how high a priority is it for you to own your own home at some point in the future? And you can see that the dream of home ownership is still very much alive for our renters and for people who are not owners right now. Fully 48% say that owning their own home is one of their highest goals, one of their highest life priorities. Another 26% say that it's at least a moderate priority. So these are folks who are going to be out there. They're going to want to be in the market. We did ask our entire sample, how likely are you to move to a new home or apartment at some point in the next 3 years? And for the folks who said that they were thinking about moving, we asked whether they expected to stay in Oregon or you expect to move outside the state. So we have 56% who say, I'm here in Oregon, like where I am, not going to move. We had 34% who said that they are likely to move at some point in the next 3 years. 23% of the state, which is 23% of our entire sample, expect to move somewhere else and stay within Oregon. We have 11% of our respondents said they expect to move at some point in the next 3 years, and they're out. They're going to leave the state. So that's 1 out of 10 registered voters say they expect to leave Oregon at some point in the next 3 years. And a lot of that is due to the high cost of housing. We had another 10% who are not sure. They're just not sure what they're doing right now. But your takeaway from here is there's going to be a lot of movement both within and some voters thinking about leaving the state as we move into the next 3 to 5 years as people evaluate their life situation. So from there, we wanted to ask about, well, what types of communities are you looking for? What types of housing are you looking for? And we're going to ask these questions of everybody because we wanted to get a sense of how voters feel about the types of communities they would like to live in as they think about Oregon moving forward, and what types of housing they'd like to see. So we started off by saying, look, if you could choose now where you wanted to live in Oregon, which of the following community types would you prefer? And we asked about rural area, a small town. We gave them 2 types of suburban areas to choose from. I'll talk about those in a second. And 2 types of city neighborhoods that they could choose from. So you can see from this slide that Oregon is a very diverse place geographically, with very rural areas, suburban areas, and your constituents and folks who live in Oregon have varied tastes. You have 28% who, if they could choose where to live right now, would want to live in a rural area of Oregon. 21% would want to live in a small town. 29% would want to live in a suburban area, and 21% would want to live in a city. So it's almost like 1 in 5. You have people who want to live in the cities, want to live in the suburbs, want to live in the small towns, or want to get way out there and live out in that very urban area. When we ask about the suburban areas, we say, would you like to live in that kind of walkable community, that mixed use community, or a suburb that was just houses only? And again, you can see both types of neighborhoods have their adherents. 20% want to live in kind of a mixed use suburban community where they can walk to places and still have their home. And another 9% wanted to live in a neighborhood only. And for our folks who say they want to live in an urban area, 14% prefer more of a total residential urban area, but 7% want to be right downtown amidst the offices and the shops and everything that the downtown area has to offer. So again, lots of different types of choices, and Oregonians want to live in all that Oregon has to offer in terms of urban, suburban, rural, and small town communities. Now, when we ask which of the following housing type would you prefer, again, so if you could choose, all things being equal, which of the following house type would you prefer? Overwhelmingly, consumers want a detached single-family home. That dream of the detached home with the yard is still what drives most people. 79% said they would prefer to live in a detached single-family home. We had 5% who preferred kind of the row house, the duplex, the triplex, that type of thing. Another 7% who wanted to be either in a 4-story or a taller building with condominiums. And we had 8% who said something else. They wrote in, they want to live in a mansion or they want to live in a ranch or something. But again, your takeaway here is that if, all things being equal, if they could choose, almost everybody wants to live in that detached single-family home. We wanted to make it a little bit harder, though. We wanted to say, look, we asked all of our respondents, imagine for a moment that you were going to buy a new home or property in Oregon. We're going to read you a list of things that people have said are important to them when buying a home. And for each one, please tell us whether it's a very important, somewhat important, not very important, or not at all important factor in choosing a home if you were buying today. And we gave them a whole list of things to choose from. We asked about living in a detached single-family home. We asked about community amenities like schools, having 3 or more bedrooms, having a home office, the size of the home, being within a short commute to work, or having the ability to walk to restaurants and shops and places where you need to get things done. So what we found is that there is definitely a constituency. A lot of these things are important to different types of folks. When we ask about having that kind of walkability, we had 19% who said that's very important to them, another 26% who said it was somewhat important. So that's about 45% who say being in that kind of area where they can walk to shops and restaurants and get their errands done from their home is either very important or somewhat important. Being within a short commute of work, 27% said that's very important. Another 35% said it was somewhat important. Even in this area of being able to work from home, lots of folks don't have that option. So having that short commute to work is still a very important consideration as people are thinking about where they want to live. The size of the home, also important. 30% say it's very important. Another 52% say that's somewhat important. Having a home office, this has really creeped up over the years. 31% say that's a very important consideration if they're going to be buying a home. 36% say it's somewhat important. So it's 2/3 want that kind of home office. Having 3 or more bedrooms, 33% say that's very important. And it's much higher for families with kids and 35 to 49-year-olds. Another 26% say that's somewhat important. And community amenities like schools and parks, 37% say that's very important. Another 35% say it's somewhat important. Again, that attributes can be much more important to folks who have a family. But far and away, the single most important thing to people as they're thinking about the things that they want in a home, if they're putting themselves in that consumer orientation again, where they're thinking about buying a home, living in a detached single-family home, 63% say that that's a very important consideration for them if they were in the market today, if they're thinking about buying a home. And that's true whether you're a Democrat or Republican, whether you're young, whether you're old, you have a college degree or a non-college degree. Even people who say they want to live in a city, almost a majority of those folks say that they prefer to live in a detached single-family home. So far and away, that is the big consumer preference in terms of if they were out buying a home today. You can see all of these things are important. As a pollster, I'm always looking at intensity. So these are the things that really stand out for some folks, but that detached single-family home is still one of the most important considerations for folks when they're in the market. Now, we did want to kind of have a little debate at the end of the survey because we know that this is something that's going back and forth in Oregon where climate change is very much on the environment. But as we've already seen, housing affordability and housing concerns are also a very high priority for folks as they're thinking about the housing issue in the agenda. So he said, look, thinking about housing development in Oregon, we're going to read you two statements, and we want you to tell us which one of these statements comes closer to your way of thinking, even if neither one of them is exactly right. So, and they heard these were rotated, of course, so half of it heard one the first and half heard the other one first. We need more affordable housing options that meet the budget and preferences of consumers, even if that uses more land and creates more carbon emissions. And the other statement is we need to do more to protect Oregon's open spaces and fight climate change, even if that means higher housing costs and fewer housing options. Well, it wasn't really that close when it comes back. Again, when you see how high and how much concern folks have with the housing issue, it plays out here in this kind of forced choice exercise. 67% said that the statement on the left, that we need more affordable housing options that meet the budget and preference of consumers, even if that uses more land and creates more carbon emissions, was where they came down. We had 28% who said that they feel more strongly that we need to do more to protect Oregon's open spaces and fight climate change, even if that means higher housing costs and fewer housing options. And you can see that there's some intensity to this. 33% agreed much more with the affordable housing statement, 10% agreed much more over here. A lot of folks were kind of in the middle. So when we really forced them to choose, you can see that the general inclination is that housing is the issue right now. Housing is the issue that needs to be addressed. We have to find ways to increase the housing stock and find housing that can meet people's budgets. And what's interesting about this question is if you divide it out by party identification, here, remember, 67% said that they preferred the statement about more affordable housing, 28% preferred the statement about doing more to fight climate change. Among Republicans, not surprising, that number goes up to 76% on the affordable housing. Among independents, 69%. But even Democrats, even a majority of Democrats, 57%, when forced to choose between those two statements, said they tended to agree more with the statement that says housing is the issue that we really need to deal with right now and find ways to get more people into homes. So that's a lot of numbers. Again, we're going to give you a link so you can download the questionnaire and look through all the questions. There's lots of other questions in the survey, and there's some summary documents there as well. But what I want you to take away from this is, again, generally, voters are dissatisfied with the direction of the state. When we ask them what they want the legislature and governor to focus on, by far their top concerns are housing issues, affordability and availability, and homelessness. Housing affordability is seen as a big problem all across the state among all demographic groups, be you young, be you old, be you Democrat, be you Republican. It is a top of mind issue for all Oregon voters because it affects all Oregon voters. It affects renters, it affects businesses, it affects people trying to move in the state, trying to attract people to the state. And it's gotten to that critical point where it's a very top of mind issue across the board. And we saw that when we asked about how much housing is available for types of people like low income and moderate income and seniors. Overwhelmingly, voters say there's too little of that kind of housing available. They also say there's not enough housing stock to buy and there aren't enough places to rent in the state. It's, again, across the board sentiment. When we went to the housing preference questions, our voters want to live in all different types of communities, urban, suburban, small town, and rural. But overwhelmingly, they prefer the single family detached home if they can. And if they're actually in the market, one of their top priorities, in fact, by far their top priority, is being able to buy that single family detached home. So that's a lot of questions. And here's some of the demographics. Again, the demographics of the poll will be available to you if you'd like to download those. And I will stop my sharing and open it up to any questions, or ask Jeremy if he has anything he wanted to add.
Great. No, why don't we go to questions from the members of the press, for you, Joe? And we'll get through those, and then after that, I'd like to invite up some other folks, and we can talk more about what this means for the upcoming legislative session. Questions?
Yes, I covered everything.
Okay.
This is Dick Hughes, and I have a question. Actually,
Go ahead, Dick.
Could you provide some context of how these results for Oregon compare with other states? And also, what did you find, if anything, that surprised you or that you didn't expect to find?
In terms of how it applies to other states, some of these are similar to the West Coast, but obviously California, Washington, Oregon are having, very big problems. I was in a poll in Washington just the end of last year. 54% called the housing affordability a very big problem, compared to 57% in Oregon. You had 27% who called it a fairly big problem. Only 20% in Washington called it that way. But clearly, West Coast is where I see the highest numbers. The only place I see higher is in Hawaii. Compared to the rest of the country, these numbers are very high. When you move, the Midwest and Atlantic and Southern states, that affordability, it's a big problem everywhere, but the very big problem is more in the 40%. When you get to the Northeast, you're back up around the 50% in terms of the affordability showing up on the radar. The financial strain question, I'd say you guys are pretty much in line with what I see in the stressed areas of the country, the Northeast, the Midwest, I'm sorry, the Northeast, the West Coast. That seems to be where folks are most strained by their housing costs. And when you get to things like preference for single family homes, that's pretty universal. Most folks prefer that single family home. That tends to be what they grew up in. Culturally, that's kind of what we're built around. You have seen some shifting to people liking the walkable communities, especially in the Northeast, where the density is a little more familiar. But I would say that preference for a single family home is pretty universal. Surprises. I would say that the forced choice questions, I thought that there might be a little more desirability for some walkable communities in Oregon, since you do have a large number of those in Portland, Eugene, Springfield. Those have been catching on. But again, I just think that the numbers on the lack of housing, and how strong that perception is really driving that folks just really see that housing shortage. Their kids can't afford their homes. Their kids can't, stay in Oregon. And I think it's really affecting a lot of people, even if you own a home. So I think that would have been the one thing that stood out to me a little bit.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Well, I can be available later if anything comes up. Just let Jeremy know, and he'll put you in touch with me.
Great. And we'll send out a link to the full poll as well. But what I'd like to do now is, and thank you, Joe, so much for the work that you did and for your presentation. What I'd like to do now is invite up Representative Brees Iverson, Senator Meek, Jody Hack from the Home Builders Association, and Dave Honeycutt from the Oregon Property Owners Association. And we can take some questions about sort of what this all means for the upcoming legislative session and the housing bills that are coming forward there. And as you all know, the governor has a priority housing bill that will be coming forward in the session. And that's something that we at the Oregon Realtors and our other coalition partners have been working hard with her on, and believe that there are a lot of elements of that bill that support sort of the all of the above approach and would allow for some of the housing types to be built that Joe talked about here. So we want to just be able to take any questions on that. And Jody, kick it over to you if you want to offer any comments up front.
Sure. I think that, the poll is telling. We're listening to the people of Oregon. And I think you'll agree that what was said today and revealed in the poll is timely. It backs up what the governor is trying to do in Senate Bill 1537, which we've been working on for many, many months. It shows that the people of Oregon want housing of all types. They want to live in urban areas, suburban areas, and rural areas. The affordability piece, I think, points to the fact that we need single-family homes, we need apartments, we need duplexes, triplexes, we need quads, we need cottage clusters, we need housing types of all forms. But we've got to have affordable land to be able to build affordable homes. So with that, we're going to turn it loose and let you guys ask us some questions, and we're happy to answer anything that we can to provide some feedback and information as we move into this session around such an important topic. You guys are going to be easy on us.
Hi, Carlos from the Oregonian here. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Sweet. So yeah, I noticed that poll pointed out that 79% of Oregonians said they would live in a detached single-family home if they could. What is the breakdown of the new housing that is being built in Oregon, and is this feasible?
That's a great question, and Jody, feel free to jump in. I don't know that number off the top of my head, but what we do know is that allowing for more single-family homes to be built would require more land to be available, and there's a lot of folks pushing to not ever expand urban growth boundaries and just try to build on land we already have inside of those urban growth boundaries. And that type of approach is inconsistent with the ability to build enough single family homes or even close to enough single family homes to accommodate those who would like to live in them and that prioritize home ownership. And I think, as you all know, there's not a lot of home ownership opportunities outside of single family homes. It'd be great if our state could get some condo liability reform legislation passed at some time so we can get more condos built again. But for folks to be able to live in those single family homes and have the benefits of ownership that we asked about in the poll, that does mean we need more land to be available. And that's why we're working hard on kind of all of the above approaches that include that component.
We pulled numbers back in August, Carlos. Haven't seen the numbers for the end of the year, but at that point we were pulling permits at just over 10,000 units. We're 140,000 plus units behind. And that's if we're building at the rate of about 19,000 units a year, pulling permits for. We were at just a little over 10,000 in August. That means we had to double that almost just to meet where we had been, which is about half of what we need to keep up with the need in Oregon. So there's no way we met our need at the end of last year. We didn't meet it the year before. So we agree we've got to build all types of housing in order to get us out of this. And I don't know, Dave, do you want to speak a little bit to those specific numbers too?
I'm happy to, Jody. I don't know the breakdown between types of units that were built. What I do know is, I think, is common knowledge, and it's been this way actually for quite some time. We are significantly underbuilding housing of all types in this state. And as Jeremy noted, there are really two causes for that that the legislature has the ability to deal with. The first one is process. The time it takes and the difficulty it takes for a property owner and a builder to pull permits to enable the housing to be built. And then the second problem is land supply. We simply don't have enough land available to build the number of units to meet the governor's projected housing needs, which are right on the mark, by the way. The number of units that she projects and indicates that we need, approximately 36,000 units a year, are exactly on the mark, not only to eliminate eventually over time the shortage that we have, but also to keep up with demand as our population grows. And so it's been important, I think, for all of us on this call to make sure that we try and deal with both the process needs and problems and the land supply needs. And fortunately, the governor's bill addresses both. And so we're excited about moving forward in that direction. We're happy to have a governor who's supportive of the issue and understands the issue. And we're looking forward to working with her this session and in the future on tackling this problem, which obviously I think we all know is the public thinks is a significant problem, and the public is right.
And one of the misconceptions about the bill is that we're pulling land from the middle of nowhere, basically, and that infrastructure is not available, and that we have land within the UGB that just needs infrastructure. While that might be true, we agree we need more infrastructure. But some of that land that's sitting within the urban growth boundary may be 15 or 20 years out from actually getting services to it, or the landowner may not be willing to even sell that land. What this bill says is it's a one-time emergency measure that in order to bring that land into the UGB that's in the urban reserve or as a non-resource land, it has to have services already available to it, and it has to border the UGB. So we're not taking land out from nowhere. It has to have those services. It's a very thoughtful and measured approach. And so I think it's important to take that into consideration too. And it provides for production, hopefully in a quick and fast way that gets building of houses and homes in a quick way. I will say too, it has a 30% affordability component to it. So it requires that 30% of those projects be in partnership with local jurisdictions and the developer to decide what part of that is affordable. So 30% of it has to be 80% AMI or less, which would be apartment buildings, or it can be 130% AMI, which is moderate income workforce housing, first-time homebuyer homes. Whatever the local jurisdiction and the developer decide is the most need in that community is what that's going to be built out at. So you're talking all types of different housing that could be available in those projects.
This is Dick Hughes again, and I have a couple of questions for you all. One is everybody seems to think that we need more housing, and probably no legislator disagrees. The devil is in how far they're willing to go and what they conceive of. And as I understand it, the legislative budget writers have said that there won't be enough money for what Governor Kotek has requested, for example. So my first question is, how will you use these poll results in the legislature? And what do you think will happen as a result of them? My second question then is related to the governor's bill. Then it includes like the idea of a model building codes and permits, or not building codes, but permit systems for cities. Do you expect cities to adopt these types of things, or just keep doing things their own way? And thank you.
Representative and Senator, do you want to talk at all about the poll and how we think it'll play out in the legislature, or would you like us to do that?
No, thank you, Joe.
Go ahead, Senator, you first.
Okay. Yeah, just listening. Well, I think how we can use the poll is to better inform our colleagues of, what our families and our communities are really searching for. And one of the things I am surprised by was the outright just stating that they are more concerned about being housed than the environment right now. And I don't think it was overly, swayed that they don't care about the environment, but unfortunately our families are part of the environment, and making sure they're housed is very important. One of the things I think that we need to take from this is that the current plan that the governor has with House Bill, is it 3417 this year, would allow some of our communities to expand along what are already planned urban reserves. And so we're not going out and digging up farmland or homes or properties that are not already along the urban growth boundary, the current urban growth boundary. So I think what I'm seeing is that, and I think part of the issue that they're not so concerned about the environment when it comes to housing is that our construction standards and codes are so amazing these days that their carbon footprint is going to be much less with newer homes than they are with our older homes that are out there. But I'm not surprised that most families want to have their own single family home out there. I've been in this business for over 30 years, and only on occasion will I have somebody say they would rather buy a condo because that's just their lifestyle choice, according to some of the data we just saw here, about 10 or 15%. But the majority of folks that are looking to, invest in their communities, get involved, and raise their families are wanting these single family homes. So I think it's going to be important for our legislature to see this data and these details, and hopefully inform us to make better decisions this upcoming session.
Thank you. I'm going to weigh in for just a minute. I do think that this information is extremely timely as we're considering the policies inside of the governor's bill, or the governor's bill, and kind of to your point of how will individual cities utilize the opportunities that are available. There's cities that do need a little extra help because they're small and they don't have as much staff to work with to get movement happening inside of their communities. They don't have the technical staff, and some of the things that are allowed for in the governor's budget will help us get some cities a little bit further down the road with potential development. Now, the thing that I think we can look at and really lean into, in addition to what the senator was talking about, is the budget side of this. We do need to look at what kind of housing do Oregonians want. And is the legislature looking at the dollars and balance them across the spectrum instead of focusing them in one space? In any economy, you watch the pendulum swing forward and back. And honestly, we need to make sure that what we're doing from the legislative approach is balanced. So we are answering what it is that Oregonians want. And what we're hearing clearly today is that Oregonians want a single family residence. So we need to make sure that what we're offering and what we're providing, what we're finding dollars for, is in response to that.
Dick, I think I can answer your model code question. The House Bill 2001 from the 2023 session, the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis ONA bill, has language that really puts some teeth into Goal 10. Goal 10 is LCDC's housing statewide planning goal that relates to housing. That bill, as it's implemented, will roll out and eventually give the state the ability to dictate to local governments that aren't meeting their housing production needs and goals the ability to adopt a model code that the state can then or that the cities can implement, and ultimately if it gets bad enough that a builder can use as opposed to whatever the city code is. Now, we hope it never gets to that point, but that is one of the tools in the toolbox that can ultimately be used in order to get a city that may not want to grow to the point where they can start to meet the needs that the state has projected that they need in order to have enough housing for their citizens.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Any additional questions?
Just one more thing, Jeremy, to address, to get back, and this relates both to Carlos and Dick's questions. We've been in the folks in the Capitol representing builders and developers and property owners, that sort of the development team in the Capitol have had the fortune to be able for quite a few years to say yes to everything. Do we need more infrastructure? Yes. Do we need a better process? Yes. Do we need more land? Yes. It's naive to stick to say that we need one of those things or two of those things, but not all three of those things. We just don't have enough money available to solve the problems strictly by providing infrastructure. We need more infrastructure to develop land that could otherwise develop that's in the urban growth boundary. But at the same time, there's land that's right on the edge of the urban growth boundary that's slated for future development that has all services available and that could be developed quickly and to provide the housing that we desperately need in these polls. And we all know the answer. We need more housing. And so that's why we're so thankful that we have a bill that's moving forward that does that while we still address all of the other, all of the other needs. And so we can do all of this at one time. We just have to take a step and maybe make some choices that haven't always been comfortable for some folks in the Capitol.
And I would say, the governor's had a process over the last 6+ months since the end of the last session where the bill failed by one vote that's pulled stakeholders in at a level I've never seen. And we've remained at that table. I have personally on behalf of the home builders and on behalf of the realtors. And not everyone's going to get what they want. But as Dave said, we've got to start somewhere and we've got to approach this from all angles. And we have to approach it, based on what Oregonians need and want. Again, the poll speaks to what the people want. But in addition to that, we can't just say one piece of this is going to fix the problem, because it's not. And you can't keep doing the same thing and expect a different result. So, in 2008, Metro is the one that decided we needed urban reserves. In 2017, they passed legislation to bring in some land in Redmond and in Bend and in Pendleton. And they put so many restrictions on it that it's been really difficult for those to be built out. I hope that we learn from those mistakes and we do better. But we keep recognizing that we need land and we need infrastructure. So it's time to act on that. So we hope that the legislators are bold in their decision making, and we hope that this gives them some backing that they need to do that. But I will say that the process has been robust. Some people don't like the outcomes, but that's typically how you get good policy. Not everybody leaves with everything they want, but it's for the best of all Oregonians. So just wanted to add that on the process. And we'll continue to stay at the table.
I'd like to just make one statement about Senate Bill 1537. And I definitely want to appreciate your work and your role with helping the governor. And I also want to thank the governor for her leadership and her commitment to trying to address housing. One of the major, I guess, I want to say breakthroughs about this legislation that's being proposed is that we've heard the terminology inclusionary zoning. Well, I think this is more inclusionary planning, where we're planning in this affordable mechanism where it will be part of not an afterthought when a builder comes in order to even get this thing started. These are going to be homes and communities that are going to be affordable, both workforce housing and affordable housing. And I'm just excited that if we're able to kind of see how this model works, we can be both responsible and help mitigate and bring on more housing options for our families in our communities that are suffering. So I'm just hoping that folks can see the value of this upcoming legislation.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Those of us up here, we'll stick around for a few more minutes in case anyone does have any additional questions. But right now, we're going to go ahead and drop the link in the chat to a webpage on the Oregon Realtors site that includes the full poll as well as additional information related to the poll. And we really thank you so much for taking the time to come here to listen to this work that we have done. That's really important on the eve of a legislative session where a significant opportunity to address Oregon's housing crisis awaits. So thank you very much, and we'll stick around for a few minutes.
Thank you all very much.
Hi, this is Carlos again with the Oregonian. I mean, quick question. I mean, you sort of addressed this, I guess, but what, if anything, is missing from the governor's bill? You know, like you said, not everyone's going to get what they want. What does that mean for realtors and home builders?
Joe, do you want to take that one?
Sure. You know, we started out, Dave can speak to this too. You know, the urban growth boundary piece has been the most contentious. And, you know, we started out with a whole lot more acres than where we ended up. There was a lot of negotiation around that in 3414 originally. You know, in addition to that, we've agreed in 3414 that we would hold back 15% of the market rate housing in order for us to show good faith that the affordable housing components would be built. They came back and said, we've got to have more assurance of that. So we've now agreed to enter into an agreement with the local jurisdictions that if we don't commence the affordable housing components of the project, that will be penalized. So we've stepped up to the plate and agreed to that. In addition to that, we've agreed to the local jurisdictions having to show need for the project. So there's multiple ways that they have to come in and show that they have need for the expansion. And I can go into details of those if you want, but I don't want to get too specific. But anyway, they have to show need. The adjustments and variance section, you know, we started out with it being pretty broad and not as scripted. It's now extremely scripted. There are density requirements around that. Most of that section will be complementary to more multifamily housing and not so much for single family and middle housing. So, you know, the list goes on and on. I know that the environmental community came to the table with about 8 or 9 different concessions that they wanted the governor to make. Those were made. We came to the table with no asks outside of just let us build houses and let's make sure that whatever we do, we have the opportunity to build all types of housing and give us a bill that actually works. We don't want to walk out of that building and have a repeat of the bill they passed in 2017 and not be able to actually build it. So we want to be able to get to the goals of 36,000 units, and you can't do that if you restrict it to the point that it doesn't work. So that's the only ask we had. That's it. And we wanted the legislature to have an opportunity to reports given out to them each year on progress in case there were things that weren't working. Outside of that, we just stayed at the table and said, just let us build houses of all types.
Carlos, I'll just add one thing and to what Jody said and the work that's been done by the folks on the phone, Senator Meek, Representative Breeze Iverson, Jody, Jeremy, and I and many others have gotten us, and especially the governor, have gotten us to where we are today. But I don't think, you know, if the bill passes as it is, and there are no amendments to the bill, it will help. And we're excited about it, and I think we can show that we can build housing at rates that we simply haven't been able to build for the last, well, for at least a decade. So it will help. But I don't think it will get there. And I don't think anybody expects that we'll be able to, with this bill alone, to meet the governor's projected targets. So ultimately, we'll be looking to show that you can implement this bill. It'll result in more units. There'll be units that the public likes. It will work. But we'll still need to continue discussions on ways to increase production. Some things that the legislature can do, and there may be things that the legislature simply can't do in order to get us to where the governor says where we need to be. So I don't want, my advice to legislators will be, this is a great idea. We're pushing it hard. We like it. But don't be dejected if we don't reach the housing numbers that we all recognize that we need.
And I would just add, we have, there is conversation around some direct allocated funds to projects that have gone through comp planning, that are sitting at the cities, but just need some infrastructure. We push pretty hard for that. It may be that a city just needs a water pump station, or a city light, or a small interchange, or something like that, that could increase production in a quick way. I know they're looking at some of that, and those infrastructure projects would hopefully also trickle down into other projects that could increase numbers pretty quickly. So we're hoping they're going to consider that this session as well. That's yet to be determined. I think one of the things Dave mentioned earlier was process is a problem. We're hoping that standing up the HAPO, which is the Housing Accountability and Production Office, which is a place that's in the governor's bill, it's a place where local jurisdictions and builders and developers come to the table to talk about issues that they're having. Local jurisdictions may not be interpreting laws correctly, or may just be obstructionists when it comes to building. We have some good actors and we have some not so good actors. This is a place where they can come and try to mediate those things and work together. We're hoping that that's going to be a soft landing place for those who want to build, and a place that gets things done for those who don't. So all those things combined, again, it's a tool in the toolbox. It's a step in the right direction, but we've got a lot of work to do in the state of Oregon.
I just wanted to hop in real quick. Again, I'm Brent Landells. I'm the 2024 president-elect for the Oregon Realtors. I'm a producing broker, or producing realtor. I still spend I started in 1989 representing builders and developers, and I still spend my weekends sitting in sales models. I'm on the front lines talking to homeowners every single weekend, or potential homeowners. And what government is telling us to do is not what the citizens want that I talk to every single weekend. The term postage stamp lot is more common than anything else. So when I talk to people, when I started selling in 1989, it took about 3 months to get through land use, from the time that we found a piece of dirt until we had tractors creating homes or creating streets to then create homes was about 3 months. The last neighborhood that I did was 32 months to get through land use, and there were no variances being asked for on the property. It was inside the urban growth boundary. It had utilities to the property. It was appealed and held up through the process for 32 months. The cost involved that has to get added to the cost of the homes for that 32-month delay, because it gets appealed ad nauseum, that has to be passed on to the homeowners. And it is incredibly common that happens now. Pretty much everything. And that was only a 20-lot neighborhood. It was not a significant change in the neighborhood or anything else. And it's just, there's this enormous disconnect from my perspective on it between the homeowners, the citizens of Oregon that I talk to every weekend, to what I hear from the legislature, to what I hear from city councils, from what I hear from when I'm talking to people at the counties. I live in Bend, but I spent half my career in the Portland metro area. there is an enormous disconnect between citizens and what the legislature and what our governing bodies are telling people how they have to live and how people actually want to live. And this poll completely verifies and shows exactly what I hear every single weekend, is what government is telling people is not what people actually want out there.
Thanks, Brent. Any other questions out there? Last chance. All right, so the poll link is in the chat. If you have further questions, please do follow up, and we greatly appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.